From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, welcome to From Canada, Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, April the 5th, 2025. My name is Jack Atkin. I'm here with Norm Ryder. And this program is about news and current events, but from my perspective, also from the point of view of democracy and the question of, are we a democracy? Do our governments work for us? And also the question of, do we have a free press? So are we a democracy? Do we have a free press is the underlying theme. So one important thing I think that our rulers never really want us talking about is to be holding them responsible for what's going on. And what's going on in Canada right now is, for a lot of people, tough times. And for me, the question is, why are these tough times happening? And I think the answer is that we don't have the democracy we think we have, and nor do we have the free press that we think we have. The free press, I mean, we can talk about whether or not Canada is a great democracy, but there's no question that Canada's corporate-owned media are owned by the corporations and the very, very rich, and they don't work for us. So when we look at the housing crisis, where so many people have to pay more and more for either a rent or a mortgage, and I looked it up, where did the mortgage payments go? So I think what happens, at least with the banks, is they finance your mortgage and then they sell that along with 1,000 other people. They sell that as an investment. So your mortgage is essentially flowing to investors, I think, in many cases, because the investors buy the mortgages in packages that the banks sell. So when interest rates went up over the last couple of years, I mean, that is nothing but good news for the investors, right? Or so it seems. Maybe I'm wrong here. And what I think has happened over the last 15 or 20 years in Canada is that the people who run things have deliberately created a shortage of housing in Canada and used that to push up rents and push up prices. And I mean, you can certainly make the case that that's what happened. The question is, was it deliberate or is it just by accident? Is it just by accident that the second biggest country in the world, with a population of about 41 million people, cannot find a way to house the people who live here? So it used to be that people worked to make money and people had a house to live in. But I think, well, I mean, it's a fact that that's been changed completely around. I think it's deliberate. So they've turned it into a situation where for a lot of people, if you work, you can't make a living. But if you happen to own or be in the housing industry, and especially in the land industry, the landowners, then there are fortunes to be made. And what they have done is kind of turn Canada's housing stock into a casino, a worldwide casino that we pay for. And, some people do very well from it. People who were in the market 20, 30 years ago did great, even, whatever. But for a lot of people, it's a disaster. And I think that was the plan, to take our housing and turn it into something that a lot of people have made a lot of money from. And our governments along the way have allowed that to happen, and just they've done their part. And the media never talks about that, as if it's beyond even thinking about that that this would be getting done to us. But I just want to show a very quick story, and then this is over, if I can find it. Here it is, in the National Post, of all places. This is a column in the National Post. It says, Canada is looking more and more like a neo-feudal state, with a small number of very wealthy individuals and an increasingly expanding lower class of people whose incomes and wealth are shrinking year by year. So I think one can make the argument that that is happening. I'd actually like to read it again if I can find it again. Basically, Canada is beginning to look like a neo-feudal state, and feudalism is where you have a nobility and you have the peasants, and increasingly the peasants are us, and if we can't change it around, it's only going to get worse. Norm, any comment or your first comment?
Well, actually, I guess you could say my first comment with the Canadian election, that they're not talking about the housing industry very much. That's the entire election is taken over by what's going on to the south of us, which I sort of hate to add to it, but we'll be talking about that later in the show. But one thing that's not talked about very much in our housing industry is the lack of the skilled workers. And this is something that they've brought about for the last, probably 40 or 50 years, that they've cut back on training of skilled workers. And it takes a lot more than just being able to recognize what a hammer is and a nail and banging around with it to build housing. But we're losing those skills. And they're talking about, well, we need to step up immigration to bring in more skilled workers to build our housing, which we're going to increase the population here drastically, and to build more houses really makes very little sense. That we'll never get ahead if we keep bringing more people in. But going back, looking at our whole election, the media seems to have pretty much decided that it will be Mark Carney that will be the leader. As a matter of fact, a composite of polls shows that he's something like a 99% chance that we will get a Liberal majority government. Not that I think a Conservative minority or majority government would be better, but a majority government, we lose, in a sense, all semblance of democracy. It's strictly run by the party and by I guess you could say, the party hierarchy who's controlling it will be running the show. And all I can see is really, no matter which of the two major parties get in, the rest of them, there's not a chance of, they'll be lucky if they get a seat or two. But we're going to continue this downhill slide. Right now, they're pretending to be interested in us to a certain extent. But I think you've been around, going by the color of your hair, you've seen enough elections to know that a politician promise means very little once they get into the seat. All semblance of democracy dies until about 2 months before the next election.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to agree with a good deal of that, especially what you've said at the end. And it's a real problem in Canada that the people we elect, I mean the MPs in this case, our members of parliament, really don't have the power to represent us, because the way the parties operate, and I'm not sure if this is in Canadian law, this is written, but the way the parties operate is that the party leaders, whoever they are, here, the Liberal Party leaders, the Conservative Party leader, here in BC, we have the various parties. The party leader has the right to sign the nomination papers of anyone who's going to run for the party. So this gives the party leader basically total control over the people we elect. And that is not good for the rest of us.
I don't think it's Canadian law, other than the parties can run the party how they want. And they all give complete control to, theoretically, the leader of the party, but really, I think, in fact, it's the board of directors behind the leader that are calling the shot.
Yeah. I rejoined the BC NDP over the last couple of years, which is our governing party here in British Columbia. And I tried to get active, tried to get involved. I was absolutely shocked at how a small gang, you have to call them, completely runs that party. The membership of the BC NDP, which is the government here in British Columbia, the membership are completely, in my opinion, irrelevant. And if you're going to have a democracy, that is not the way things have to work.
Well, I was going to say, it's not. I don't think it's just the NDP. I think you could join any of the parties and say exactly the same thing and be right.
So let's move on to the topic of tariffs. For me, the problem with this story is, I read just a couple of days ago that the EU, the European Union, has been preparing a response to these possible tariffs since before Trump was elected, because they knew of the possibility, okay? So they've been preparing a response. And yet in the United States, tariffs are not controlled by the president. Tariffs are controlled by the U.S. Congress. And I'm just going to show you something about that. If I can find it, here it is. This is from the U.S. Congress, congress.gov. And the second paragraph says, the Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate foreign commerce, impose tariffs, collect revenue, and etc. As discussed in this report, Congress has long enacted laws authorizing the president to adjust tariff rates on goods in certain circumstances. So, yes, the Congress can give the president authority to do that, but constitutionally, it is the Congress's authority to control tariffs. So all of this craziness over the last few months that we are told has been brought onto us by President Trump can only happen because the Congress is allowing it. At least there should be a fight. And, from my, believe me, I am no expert in any of this, but from what I've read and seen, if there was a fight and it went to the Supreme Court, the court would say, well, the Constitution says that tariffs are controlled by the U.S. Congress, which means that the Congress could have said to President Trump from the beginning, give us a plan, give us a timeline, do something sensible that we, the Congress, agree with, and yeah, we will go, we'll do it. But instead, the media is pretending, and the Congress is pretending, that somehow this is the power of the president. And so we've had all this craziness enacted upon us and upon the entire world. We've seen the stock market fall, which is significant. And nobody knows what's going to happen next. So again, if the Congress has allowed this to happen, then it raises the question of why. And it seems to me that what is being done is that the United States is removing itself or being removed from control of the world. And that could be in part because the United States is in many ways a mess, right? And again, I don't think that's the fault of the American people. I think the people who run the United States, the powerful worldwide elites who control everything, I think those people they've bled the American people dry. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. I mean, Canada is $1.2 trillion in debt, and that is not good. The U.S. economy is about 10 times the size of ours. So, correspondingly, they should be 12, but instead they're $36 trillion in debt. They spend more on servicing the debt every year than they do on their military. And the poor American people have had to fight all of these crazy, crazy wars that the people who rule the United States have created. And the United States has been, the people at the bottom have just been taken advantage of. Same here in Canada. And now it looks like, under the guise of President Trump, who was elected because he really promised good things for the American people. I mean, I think a lot of working class American people. And so he's causing worldwide chaos, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see I don't know. I fear that they are bringing down the United States, and the elites will move the power structure, seemingly, to Asia, right? And, but we've got to keep in mind that this is, if I'm right, I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, but if I'm right, this is being done. They've indebted the American people, and now they're going to suck them dry, right? They're going to suck them dry, and away they'll go. Anyways, that's my view of the world, as crazy as it is.
Well, Jack, if I had a comment on it, that I believe last night in the U.S. Senate, they voted, shall we say, voted down at least some of Trump's tariffs. Now still has to go through the House of Representatives and doesn't have much chance there, but they are beginning to take back a little bit of the power, and which is a reversal of something I think they started in the States in about 1950. And really, all the Western world seems to be giving more and more power to just their one leader, and they all have the capacity for democracy underneath with their elected representatives. So it looks like they may be finally stepping back and saying, this is just a little too far, Donny boy. We got to back off a bit. So probably the next week is going to be really interesting from that perspective, what happens.
Yeah, I agree. Although in my opinion, this Congress story is being completely downplayed. I mean, they certainly have the right. I mean, they should represent what the American people want. The Congress, especially the House of Representatives, there's 420 of them, and they hear from the people who voted them in, and they are elected every 2 years, right? So they have a short lifespan, and they, to some extent, have to do what people. Same with the senators. So, I mean, if the American people support what President Trump is doing, then the Congress should say, okay, but do the American people support the craziness, or would they like to see a plan? And that question doesn't get asked. We're just told that President Trump has all the power, which he doesn't, and he's doing this to the entire world. I mean, things are being thrown into disarray. No matter what you think of anything, I mean, that seems to be the case. And are these the whims of an out of control, guy, or is it the will of the people who run the United States? Because the Congress, who has the power here, is doing nothing, and the media won't really report that story.
I was just going to comment. You said the Congress gets elected every 2 years. A third of the Congress gets elected every 2 years. So they've got sort of a rolling changeover, which is good in a lot of ways. You won't get a drastic change, but you will pick up the change of the sentiment if you're the public sentiment, if you're listening to it.
Yeah, but I think that the House of Representatives, I should have said, the Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Yeah. There's about 30 people in the House of Representatives, and I think they all get elected every 2 years.
I'm pretty sure I think they have a 6-year term, but
Okay. Let's look into that.
Which is a good way to do it.
Yeah. Um,
Well, I wanted to take a little bit more of a look at the Trump tariffs.
Okay.
Got into quite an argument with people yesterday. Oh, Trump has a plan. He knows what he's doing. He's going to wipe out the economy and rebuild it. Well, that may be true, but I don't think so. And what I'm going by, he's done some not just poor economic financial decisions in his tariffs. There's a couple of really stupid tariffs he's come in. And, well, Jack, I was looking at our budget, and I took a quick trip down to Heard Island off of Antarctica. And there, Trump has put a tariff on what Heard Island exports to the U.S. Well, Heard Island, you can see the Penguins are quite upset about this. All their exports are going to be taxed at 10% in the U.S., and they've got quite a mass protest. But we did try and talk to them, and they've got a really unique way of protesting. I've never thought of doing that here. We all get up, dressed up in our tuxes, and protest there. Well, we'd get attention. I'm not sure if it'd be effective. I did try and talk to a couple of them, and would have had a video if I had that. All I could get out of them was a squawk, and they were telling me something about go north. And so I went north to, I'll explain why I didn't get any pictures up there in a minute, that I went north to Jan Mayen Island, which is basically close to Iceland. And all it's got there is a Norwegian military base. And I'm pretty sure they're not exporting much there. They do have a lot of grizzly bears, and that was the problem. Or not grizzly, pardon me, polar bears. And that was the problem that, well, I guess I have to agree with Trump. The polar bears are very unfriendly. And I think not just to the Americans, they're unfriendly to everyone. So I had to get out of there quite quickly. But they were talking about if Trump wanted to come up, they would have a meal with him and discuss his tariffs. They were talking about a roast. I'm not sure if that was how they were going to roast Trump. But when you look back at this, that these tariffs on places that do not export anything to the U.S., why he would have included them in his broad 10% plan. He did exclude some countries which make very little sense, such as Russia. He's not putting a tariff on this stuff they export to the U.S. So I can't see his plan is well thought out. It seems to be just grab whatever you want and throw out whatever, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
If the goal is to create chaos, then yes, it does make sense. And I think the goal seemingly is to create chaos. And the United States, I think, is being slowly, maybe quickly removed from its position of absolute power and control. And, the American people are going to go down with it or not. Well, we'll see what's going to happen. Some short snappers. I wanted to talk about climate change for those who believe for those who believe, as I do, that it is human caused. And if we became less industrial, we'd be better off. So this is from NASA, which is, I can't even remember, National Administration, blah, 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 blah. The one official voice of the United States government. Earth will continue to warm and the effects will be profound. Global climate change is not a future problem. changes to Earth's climate driven by increased human emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gases are already having widespread effects on the environment. Glaciers and ice sheets are shrinking. River and lake ice is breaking up earlier. Plant and animal geographic ranges are shifting, and plants and trees are blooming sooner. Effects that scientists had long predicted would result from global climate change are now occurring, such as sea ice loss, accelerated sea level rise, and longer and more intense heat waves. So if this is happening, and I think it is, then we should be looking at making some changes to the way we run the world. And so far, those changes are absolutely not being made. So, for example, when President Trump announced the tariffs, here in British Columbia, our premier immediately said, well, we have no more time for environmental assessments, so we'll move ahead with and this is the NDP. We have no more time for environmental assessments, so all the mining, all the logging, all the oil stuff can now just go because of the tariffs, right? So, it's like a pathetic joke. And we all have plastic in our brains because of it.
Well, Jack, the other day I was watching a TV show talking about actually railroads in Alaska and how there was a global cold period in the late 1800s, but they were talking about, and this is the glacier experts up there, talking about how the melt of the glacier started in the early, or accelerated, I guess is the way to put it, in the early 1900s. And I don't think at that time our industrialization was having much of an effect on the climate. Now, our industrial activities, I think, do cause a lot of air pollution, which is a good reason to start wondering about whether we should allow as much as we are. But when I look at some of the other indicators about, or do we have global warming? I don't think we have as much as people think. For example, that there's a sea level measurement in Victoria Harbor itself, where it's been going on for well over 100 years, every day or every hour. It's quite regular. And the sea level was rising 0.07 meters back in 1900. It's still rising 0.07 meters today. So there isn't, when you look at some of the data, there's not the strong support of it. Now, I will say that in some places, yes, there does seem to be, but that's almost a natural shift. And in cities is one good example of where heat is going up, but it's not going up so much because of global warming, if you want. It's what they refer to as urban heat islands losing the vegetation. Where I live outside of Victoria, if anything, I would say our summers are not as warm as they were when I was a kid in the same area. So now the warm period, the rainy periods are shifting over time, which I think you can expect climate to change around, but it's not changing to just a warmer temperature. Yes, some of the thermometers that they have out measuring do show that, but that is because when they put the thermometers out earlier, they were in rural areas. Now, those same temperature measurement stations have been urbanized, and there, as I say, there is a warming in the urban centers, but in the rural areas, I don't see the warming.
Okay, I would say that even whether climate change exists or not, something you said was, should we be doing what we're doing?
Well, that very much.
And to me, that is the real question. And I mean, so I'd like to see less clear-cut logging and less logging. I'd like to see less mining. I'd like to see less oil and gas being used. I'd like to see fewer cars. I'd like to see better public transit, because I think, we're destroying the planet. So would we agree on those kinds of things?
Oh, very much I agree on that. It's just that, and if they want to use climate change and global warming to achieve those objectives, I don't have a problem. But I know they're a little weaker than what they are saying.
Okay. Yeah. Next one. Do I have any faith in Mark Carney? And I don't know Mark Carney, right? I mean, I know his record, which is impeccable in many ways, but he always worked with and for the super rich. And I assume, I don't know, but the problem is, once he's elected, and it seems to be where it's going, he has the power. And that is the danger. And it's no different if we elect the Conservatives. They all, I think, work for, both parties are controlled, I think, by big business, and the corporate agenda will be moved ahead.
Well, excuse me. He definitely said the right words. Wait, do you believe him that he actually do it? Probably not. He's a politician, so we seem to allow them to get away with not being honest with us. But I keep coming back to, our housing problem is not, we don't have enough places for people to live. We have a problem with affordability of the housing. That when, shall we say, people on social assistance, I'm not sure what I think they get up to about $1,400 a month here in BC now. On the minimum old age pension, you get about $2,000 a month. But the rent for a one-bedroom unit is $2,000 a month. The affordability in this area is not there. But it also bring up another thing that I mentioned a bit earlier, that we don't have the skilled manpower to build quality units right now. Well, I was chased out of the building construction business many years ago when they cut back, and they were cutting back on the training of skilled workers, and just the skill isn't there. And actually, the current government here in BC is talking about the skills training programs to train people to be able to actually do the work. I don't know how successful that's been, but this is what people have to understand. It's not the big word of build more housing, it's build more affordable quality housing.
50 years ago, when people were building housing, it was, single family units mostly, and small apartment buildings. But now we're building even here in Victoria, 20 and 30 story tall buildings that people are investing in. And, it has to be a place where they can live for 50 to 100 years. I think that's what people are buying into. And and we've had some real disasters here in British Columbia over the past 20 years with shoddy construction that was allowed by the government, and it created these, I don't remember what it was called, the leaky condo syndrome. And it was a disaster for a lot of people. And they had to pay, right? They were the people who were not at fault at all, who were the people who bought the condos. They were the ones who had to pay. And I don't think that rule has changed, because these companies build and they disappear. And people invest their life savings into this. And these buildings are complex and cost a lot to maintain. And are they even built? When I go by construction sites, very often you see they're looking to hire all the trades, right? Well, if you're bringing in new people all the time into a very important situation, you better be sure that that it works. And I don't know if that's the case.
Well, that's exactly what it is that can't put a unskilled or freshly exposed to construction worker up on a swing stage 100 feet up in the air and expect them, talking about the leaky condos, to put the caulking in properly. That's a difficult job. You might be able to do it well in the lab, but once you get up there with the wind and the rain doing that type of thing, it takes a special type of person. We're not training that type to do it.
Last one. At a place where I sometimes work, the city government here in Victoria, it wasn't the city of Victoria, it was the city of Oak Bay, which is a suburb, which has its own government, just put in, or just changed the red light and the walk signal at the corner near this place. So they've made it louder, right? And now every time somebody crosses the street, it's beep, 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 beep. For 20 years, it hasn't been that, but they did something, and now it is that. So I phoned up the city and talked to the people who were in charge of this, and the first thing they said when they answered the phone was, I said, I want to talk about this thing. And they said, oh, is it about the noise? So obviously I wasn't the first person who called. And I'm wondering, why? Why are they doing this? It's completely insane to have this loud beeping noise that you can hear a block away for absolutely no purpose. It can be very much lighter sound, so it doesn't bother people and still do the job it's intended to do, or there are other ways around the problem. But our city here in Victoria, virtually everywhere you go, there's this never-ending beep, 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 and especially and people live around that. So it makes me ask the question again, are they, being the people who run things, deliberately trying to make us crazy, or what?
Well, noise pollution is a real problem, and you're right, it is getting worse. But just looking at that louder beep there, that you see it all over the place, that if there's a problem, they raise, we'll call it passive safety action. Not that the beep sounds or feels that passive, but they raise it up and they keep making more and more, rather than do the one simple thing of enforce the rules for crossing a crosswalk, enforce the speed limit signs. And they're not enforcing the rules they have. They're just basically making it more difficult for us to live around the situation. I can go, right now I see a lot of things like same annoyance. So putting speed bumps in rather than enforcing the speed limit to slow people down. Well, that worked for years, and I'm sure you collected a few speeding tickets over your lifetime.
Nope.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, strange. Anyways, yes, I do know speeding tickets have a tendency, when you pay the fee or the fine, you think a little bit about, maybe I should drive a little slower, or at least a little slower when the cops are there. Seems like they're not there, I don't need to do it. But this is exactly, they're stepping back from encouraging people to follow the rules, and we'll make this sound louder so it's annoying people, but it's not going to stop the problems. People are still going to ignore it.
Yeah. Norm, thank you very, very much. And thank you, everybody. We talked about some interesting things to the show, I think. And I think the one thing we have to be doing is moving in the direction of more democracy, which means people have a bigger voice. I do have faith that the general public will do a lot better for us than the corrupt politicians and corporations who now run things. Thank you very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.